A quick favor before we start, if you love the Blueprint podcast, please rate and review us wherever you listen. It makes a huge difference. Thanks and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Michael Sodini. Michael is the founder and CEO of Walk the Talk America, a nonprofit bringing together the firearms community and mental health professionals to reduce stigma, build understanding, and offer real tools to prevent tragedies. With over 27 years in the firearm industry, Michael is known for being the most ungun gun guy and has a heart for mental health. Michael has launched free screenings, clinician training on gun culture, and outreach that bridges polarized spaces. He believes real change starts with listening, compassion, and education. Michael Sodini, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
I'd really appreciate it if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who you help.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a third generation firearms industry professional. I got into the firearms industry, obviously through nepotism. Wasn't necessarily familiar with firearms culture, even though having family members that were in the business, I didn't necessarily grow up where guns were common. I grew up in New Jersey and I grew up in San Francisco, California. Just wasn't exposed to gun culture, did not really know what the Second Amendment meant to many people, and didn't really understand the Second Amendment necessarily myself. But going into that situation and learning about what firearms mean to everyone from first responders to combat vets to your average everyday person who wants to protect their home and their community, it was eye-opening. And now I've become that Second Amendment guy. But I currently own a nonprofit organization that bridges a gap between guns and mental health that was started in the firearms industry called Walk the Talk America. I transitioned from owning the gun company to doing this full time in 2019. So that's where I am right now in life.
That's amazing and a really quick turnaround for bringing that all together. What is the meaning of the Second Amendment to a lot of people?
The Second Amendment is one of the most important amendments for a lot of people, I believe. They believe that amendment holds up all the other amendments in the Constitution. For me, obviously, it is to protect yourself from a tyrannical government, but there's a lot more meaning in it for me as well, right? Just the ability to be your own first responder, I think, is super important. I think our first responders get a bad rap sometimes with the media, and we can't always count on our first responders to be there the second something happens. So being able to protect myself, my family, my community, and share gun knowledge with those that may be either anti-gun or gun ignorant is something that I pride myself on these days. And tying Walk the Talk America into it, I think the special part is the organization is from the firearms industry, and we are doing something about every negative outcome of firearms. So when you come to the table with solutions, as opposed to just staying problem stuck or pointing out problems, I think people that are gun neutral, gun ignorant, or anti-gun tend to listen more about where we're coming from as pro-2A people.
You also brought up in another interview that guns have also saved people from the aspect of we have our veterans that come back and they get involved with some of the sportsmanship and the hobby that comes along with that. And I was hoping you could share that story with us as well.
Yeah, I've had countless veterans obviously contact us, or I meet them at speaking engagements and talk about how important their gun was, how important the firearm was for when they came back from, say, Afghanistan and they were suffering from PTSD. And if it wasn't for the firearm, to be able to go out to the range thinking they wouldn't be here anymore. I remember one time I was speaking at the White House. This is at the very beginning, the early stages of Walk to Talk America. So it's interesting that I was even there. But I remember sitting there and we had to give this they're like small TED Talks, right? Talking about who you represent and what you do. And I remember ending mine with the firearms industry can help with suicide prevention. You just can't make a civilian anymore. And I sat down, and then there was somebody in the room who's very highly decorated, right? And he He got up and he gave this speech, and it burned in my head my entire life. I owe this guy everything. He doesn't know what he did for me. It almost looked like I paid him, but I remember he stood up and he said, when I was 18, I enlisted, and the first thing you did was give me a gun. And he goes, you told me to name it. He's told me to make it part of my identity. Told me to go kill with it. And I did that. I went overseas and I killed with it, and I did that well. And then when you were done with me, I come home to America, and the very first thing you do when I go into crisis, because I don't know how I'm fitting back into society, is it's like, you want to take away the thing you told me to name. You want to take away the thing that's part of my identity. You want to take away the thing that keeps my family safe. And I remember that stuck with me, because that just goes to show you, like, it means so much to people, and it can be therapeutic, right? It can be that safety blanket that keeps somebody alive.
And so what was the moment or the experience that made you realize that there was a gap between mental health and firearms that needed to be addressed?
2009, the president of my own company and a dear friend of mine took his own life with a firearm. And that gentleman and I used to talk about how the firearms industry, and we both observed it as two, I would say, non-gun guys that were gun guys, watching every year the amount of suicide that happens within the firearms culture, the Second Amendment culture. It seemed like we lose so many first responders or so many vets or active duty military that would be at, say, the NRA show or the SHOT Show that would come visit us every year at the booth. And we used to laugh and say, yeah, we don't address these negative outcomes of firearms because a couple things, right? I think most of that stuff was used against us, right? When it comes to the Second Amendment. And then the other part is, I think no one really wants to face the darkness of firearms ownership. Like when you're at a firearms show and there's all kinds of like-minded people, right? There's many reasons to own guns, and 99% of them are enjoyable and healthy. You just get this small percentage that people equate the firearm with that's negative. But that's not why I started this organization. But that was a huge impact on my life, because obviously, dear friend and typical firearms industry, like he was a very popular person, and we buried him. We put him in the ground, but nobody wrote about it. Nobody talked about it. There's no blogs. There's no articles. It was just one of those things where, just like everyone else, we kept it moving. In 2018, I had a chance meeting with a complete stranger in New Orleans. And this person was asking me about what happens during a mass shooting. And I said, everybody blames us. We blame mental health, and nothing ever happens. And obviously this person was asking me why nothing ever happens. And I said, just because we can't agree on certain things, all of the rights restrictions and stuff like that, it's complicated. And she goes, how do you work with the mental health community on the things you can agree upon? And it was that light bulb moment. I was like, oh man, I don't think we do. Or we really don't. And then basically getting inspired, my national sales manager was at the dinner, and he turned to me and he's like, yeah, man, you should give $1 a gun to mental health. Just throwing that out there. And in my head, I was like, yeah, what if we raised money to work with mental health? And at that time, I wanted them to fix the problem, right? I wasn't looking at it as like the gun industry or the firearms industry could be the leaders in this space with providing our own solutions. I wanted to big pharma my way out of it. I wanted to just pay a bunch of money and then be the good guy. But then when I realized that was not going to be possible, that no one really has the answers, right? There's no easy solution for any negative outcome of firearms. It forced me to look inside of the firearms industry and say, okay, what are the things we can do? What can we provide to our customers? How can we change the culture? And that's where we're at now, right? Coming up with alternative solutions and creative ways to get gun owners help without fear of consequence, and educating people that historically have been looked at like the other side.
And so what are some of these solutions that you've been able to come up with?
So the very first thing that I ever did as someone who owned a gun company is I worked with Mental Health America to get their free and anonymous mental health screenings in the boxes of their firearms, of my firearms, right? So I represented 4 different brands. All of these brands were from outside of the United States. And I remember going back to my manufacturers and saying, hey, I want to put free and anonymous mental health screenings in the boxes of all of our guns. And every one of my manufacturers gave me their blessing. They were like, oh, that's a great idea. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with them being foreigners, to be honest, because back then, guns and mental health were mutually exclusive. They did not go together. But freedom is something that's so important to us in the US. In other countries, they're a little less lax on the whole freedom thing, right? So I think they just saw it as a good idea because when the way I was describing it is like, hey, it's free and anonymous. We want our customers to stay mentally healthy. And they're just like, oh, yeah, do it, right? But here's me having a meeting with my team in the United States saying, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to get in trouble from the NRA. I don't know if NSSF, which is the National Shooting Sports Foundation, is going to get mad at us. I don't know if our customers are not going to like this, but I want to do it. And what was cool is we're sending out 60 to 80,000 guns a year at that time, right? And we start getting people calling our office saying, hey, I just bought one of your Bursas. Like Bursa was one of the brands, is an Argentinian gun. And they're like, there's this free and anonymous mental health screening in the box of the gun. And people were sharing suicide loss stories. People were sharing their mental health struggles that they'd gone through. They were very grateful that a firearms company was actually like doing that. So after about 6 or 7 months, I was like, what's the next, where do you go next with this? And I'm just like, let me see if some other gun companies will do it. And I remember like walking up to Arms Corps, which is a gun from the Philippines, and then High Point, which is an American made gun, talking to their presidents saying, hey, I've been putting this card in a box for 6 months. The response is great. And they're like, what is it? I'm like, free and anonymous mental health screenings for our customers so they can check themselves out without having to feel like they have to go to a therapist, because that's the biggest fear with many people. And we'll talk about the stigma, right? But I remember like both of them were like, that's a really good idea. I'm surprised nobody else thought of that. Yeah, we could put it in the box. And then here's me thinking, wow, is that easy? Like the willingness has been there the whole time, just no one thought of the idea. Like it can't be that simple. So like that was the very first pilot program that we kicked off. And now I'm happy to say we have about 80 different firearms, either manufacturers or accessory companies, everything from ammo companies that are including either the card or some version of the screening on their packaging. Right. So that was like the send off, and it made it okay. Right. Like then firearms companies were starting to say, okay, yeah, maybe we can lean into this a little more. And then we evolved into all of our other programs, right? We have a ton of programs. So if you think of every negative outcome, we have a program for it.
That's really the next step of it, right? So you have the awareness program, which is going to be having that inside of the box. And then the next step is going to be some educational programs to go along with that, because people are going to want and desire whatever that next step actually is. Kudos to you for putting that all together.
Thank you. And our second program, something I'm insanely proud of, is we were the first organization to come up with a cultural competence course for basically about firearms culture for mental health and behavioral health clinicians. So what we do is we give CEU credits and we bring in mental health clinicians to understand firearms culture, right? And it's apolitical. Like we don't get involved in that, but we just talk about, this is the firearms community. This is what's important to us. This is our fear. So it works both ways, right? We're demystifying the counseling process for many gun owners, but at the same time, we're also teaching mental health clinicians about firearms culture. And it's great because like we've had thousands of clinicians come through the course. Many of them admit, hey, I'm not into guns, right? Or I've never held a gun, or I know nothing about guns. And watching them kind of work through after the course, because they all have to take a questionnaire to get the CEU credits, but watching them like go, oh, wow, I never realized the way I ask about guns could be off-putting for certain people, or I never knew gun owners were afraid of me. This makes sense. Now I got to rethink the way I approach this. So it's like programs like that.
And what were some of the other just feedback that the therapist had based off of the program?
If you go on our website, you can see, obviously we have some of the feedback that comes through, but we've had everything. We've had the extreme. We've had someone who is super anti-gun, literally shooting an AR-15, and then totally going from one end of the spectrum to the other. Now, that's not why we do it. we're not sitting here I tell people all the time, especially in these courses, I'm like, look, you're going to take this course, and I'm not asking you to be pro-gun. I certainly am not asking you to be anti-gun. If you become anti-gun if you take this program, then I've failed. But if I can get you to be pro-understanding, that's where I need you to land. So we've had the extreme where someone has gone from anti to that, but most of it is the positive feedback is, I never understood the argument of the AR. Right now, I have a much better understanding of it. Or I never understood why red flag laws could be potentially detrimental to gun owners, and never thought of the negative outcomes of some of this gun legislation, right? Meaning, like ERPOs, extreme risk protection orders, and red flags can prevent someone from going to seek care because of the consequences that they feel could happen if somebody red flags them or thinks they shouldn't own guns, right? So think of somebody who's in crisis at stage 2, and they're like, I want to go talk to somebody, but I'm afraid, but I don't want to lose my guns. And then all of a sudden, where do they go? They white knuckle it, they hit stage 3, and then they hit stage 4. And that's when crisis happens, right? And a lot of people, especially clinicians, were like, oh, I never thought about that. Like, I've had clinicians actually tell me, I just thought you guys wanted to arm everybody, right? Like, they never thought about, oh my God, you gave me something to think about with these laws. And now I understand why you say red flag laws can get people killed. It's not necessarily the confiscation part. That could also be a sticky situation, right? You're sending police officers in there to confiscate someone's property and then being like, hey, I took your property. Good luck out there in life. That's not somebody. Like, big picture is, how many people don't seek care because they're afraid of the consequence of seeking help?
Hey, Blueprint listeners, if today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to truly unlock your own personal transformation, I invite you to explore the Self-Discovery Blueprint. This is where we dive deep into the strategies and insights you need to understand who you are, clarify your purpose, and build the life you're truly meant for. It's the comprehensive guide to your next level growth. You can find out more by visiting my stand store, link in bio, or in the show notes. Yeah, that's one of those things. Imagine if you could just walk into a police department or a place where it was safe and secure, and you could drop off your firearms and ammunition and say, look, I'm going through something right now. I am in therapy. I'm going through whatever I need to go through, doing all the checks and balances. Yeah, but right now I need to offload this someplace else. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of consulting, and I work with the Armory Project out of Louisiana. And it's a program that I am grateful for, right? To help people develop these voluntary storage maps where you get shops, especially gun shops, to get involved. That they tell their customers, look, if you ever go through crisis, and crisis is temporary, all crisis is temporary, right?
And everybody's going to go through it.
Yeah.
You can't escape this life without going through some sort of crisis.
100%, right? So anyone, if you're ever in crisis or you have a family member in crisis and you just want the guns out of the house, you can bring them here and we will give them back to you when you're ready. And it's a way to get a couple things there. It's a way to get gun owners comfortable with coming forward to go get help because they do have resources. And then the second thing is, it's a way to get gun stores involved in the conversation. Now, what I like about what the Armory Project did out of Louisiana, it was a lady named Gala True who started the project, is when she first started going around asking stores to be involved, many of the stores were like, look, we would love to do something like this with you, but the risk.
Yeah, there's liability there.
The liability, right? If we give the guns back too soon, we don't want to lose our business. So it's not worth it for us, right? So Gala, being as forward thinking, she was like, look, I'm going to go out and pass legislation that basically removes the liability from the gun shops for doing the right thing, right? It's like a good Samaritan clause. And then as soon as she did that, they went from 3 shops to 40, which shows you that the firearms industry wants to be involved in this, right? We just don't want to be punished for doing the right thing. And I tell people all the time, like, there are certain shops that take in a lot of firearms, right? Like they just do naturally. And then you have these other shops where they're like, not one person has come and actually brought their guns in. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. It's more important that you offer it.
Yeah.
That's great if all your customers are healthy and they don't, but just the fact that you're offering it is just as important as if whatever gun you're taking in. And then there's, like I said, there's other shops that take in a bunch, right? So they make it a real big point to push the program and their customers are comfortable with it. But this is going to be when people ask me about all of these programs, every program that I have, this is why politicians run away from me, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, they run away from me because they want the quick fix, right? This is about a culture change. So all my programs, I'm like, give me 6 years. Just give me 6 years and I'll show you what the firearms industry can do. I'll show you how you get people to change their mind about this stuff. We were separated in this discussion that I think a lot of people in the firearms industry never thought they could be part of this conversation without compromising how they felt about the 2A.
I think intellectually, a lot of people get to this place very quickly that, we should just take them all away.
Yeah.
And then the problem's solved. And is it? Does that solve the problem? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, it doesn't solve the problem. I always ask people when they say that, I'm like, what is your threshold for death? It's crazy what we can accept sometimes, right? Like like somebody will like, one death is too many when it comes to firearms, but then you have drunk driving and nobody gets really upset about a guy who kills a family of 6 because they tied too many on. And that's where I'm trying to get the firearms industry, is where the alcohol industry got with DUIs. I believe we could be the leaders in this space and we can come out with our own programs. But in my opinion, when you say, I would just want to get rid of all guns, that's not going to happen. That's a cartoon world, in my opinion. I've been in this game way too long and seen these fights, and I know the nuance of gun ownership and all the positive things that come from gun ownership. And I think people just get problem stuck. I always tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, I don't think you hate guns. I think you hate people dying and you hate people being hurt. And that's meeting them where they're at. And
which
I always
makes
say,
you
look,
a very normal and beautiful human being, that you care about other people so much. Like,
exactly.
thank
Exactly.
you. We like that. We would like
Yeah.
more of that.
And most people, once you let them off that hook, especially when I tell them, look, you can hate guns after we're done talking, you can tell me, I just still hate guns. I wish they'd all go away. And I'm like, I'm still going to give you a hug and buy you a beer at the bar. But that's a way to connect with people, to just make them understand where this is going. I tell people all the time, and I don't mean to freak people out by this, especially when I'm talking to, say, non-gun people, behavioral health and stuff like that. It tends to be more center left with their ideas. I always say, we sold 60 to 80,000 guns at Eagle Imports. That was the name of the company that I owned. And we didn't have any military or law enforcement contracts. Those are 60 to 80,000 guns a year that just went into the hands of civilians. And I'm like, so now if we're considered small, think about what Ruger does. Think about what Glock does. Think about what Smith & Wesson does. Think about what SIG does. I can do this for 20 minutes. I'll just keep naming, right? And then I'm like, it's amazing we don't have a bigger gun issue in the United States. If you think about the sheer amount of firearms that are out there, it really is. I always compare it to when I found out growing up in San Francisco, my mom would take me to the San Francisco Bay and I'd swim in that water. And I remember one day watching a documentary about the bay and how many great white sharks and sharks go through the bay. Right? And it's, oh my God, you let me swim in there? But it's like, maybe we don't have a big shark problem. Maybe we just need to focus on solutions that work for everybody. The sheer amount of guns out there, it's pretty wild. It's amazing how civilized we are with firearms, actually.
It's also, the other thought process here is, those who seek to do harm are going to accomplish that goal regardless of the method or the means. So you can eliminate one of everything, and then they're just going to find an alternative method. So then this really does come back down to intent and a mental health issue.
It does. And that's why I always ask, what's your threshold for death? We've seen it recently. We've had a rough 3 weeks in America as humans, like as Americans, as humans, right? It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you stand on. We've had a rough 3 weeks. We've watched people get stabbed in the neck. We've watched people get shot in the neck. We've had school shootings. Like, it's tough on the psyche, right? But I don't know. I don't think you can legislate evil. I really don't. I think it's impossible to legislate evil. And I know that sounds dark, but I have hope that we can do a lot of great things to get upstream to prevent the unpredictable, as opposed to like staying problem stuck and trying to legislate our way out of evil.
It gets back to this place of we have to be willing to have civil discourse with one another and lead with curiosity and a desire to try to understand each side of the argument and really come to that place where can we meet in the middle? If we know this solution isn't going to happen and this solution is not going to happen, then there's some common ground there in the center that we really have to start navigating towards and then start accepting that this is where we're working towards and where we're going to go.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things I'm most proud of, right? Because like I can talk to my echo chamber all day long and I can try to inspire my echo chamber to do something, right? We can do this. We can put cards in the box. We can do safe storage programs. We can do all these things. But really what I'm most proud of is the ability to walk into the places that historically have been looked at as anti-gun and kind of give a different perspective and let people know, hey, this is what's going on. And this is what we're doing about it. I was just at a research conference in New Jersey on gun violence prevention. Most of the room was either behavioral health, social workers, and then there was a few groups that the Second Amendment community would look at as anti-gun, right? It's the Brady's and the Moms Demand Action and stuff like that. And we're all able to have civilized conversations. And I remember at one point, at one of the breakout sessions, the guy from Brady, I was the keynote speaker, and I don't think he realized that, because I was in a breakout session. And at one point he was like, I said, the firearms industry is coming strong with a lot of the programs to reduce negative outcomes of violence. And I remember he like looked over at me and he's, can you show me any evidence that is true? And so his expectation level of me was 0. And I just told him, I was like, watch my speech at 1:00. I think you're going to change your mind. And sure enough, after he came up and he's, yeah, man, I really appreciate what you're doing. And that's what I want, right? Like I want even the people that hate guns to be able to be like, I hate guns, but I love what these guys are doing. It just makes sense, right? Because we can get problem stuck and it's that same madness loop that we all get caught in, where nothing gets done.
I love the story that you told about your daughter as well. I was listening to that podcast and I thought it was really great with the utilization of the tool. So could you share that with us real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. This whole idea with the card in the box with the mental health screenings came from my 11-year-old daughter. And yeah, when I had no direction on where to go, I remember one of my board members, when I went back and I had to tell my board members, look, the mental health community doesn't have an easy fix for any of this. Even if we hand them $1 million, they don't have an easy fix for this. I remember one of my board members stood up and he was like, anyone can give money to mental health. How are we going to be different? We are from the firearms industry. And this is a pressing thought for me because I had nothing at that time. So I'm sitting at home trying to think, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? My daughter walks into my office and she's, hey, Dad, I think I suffer from anxiety. And I was like, oh, wow. Because I grew up in a family, Italians from New Jersey, that if you were to walk into the office and say, Dad, I think I suffer from anxiety, the answer would have been, I will give you something to have anxiety about. And you just kept it moving. But with my daughter, it was like this teachable moment because I'd been working with Mental Health America and I was always impressed by their screening. Now, when I say impressed by the screening, I was impressed by it. I didn't know if it worked. Right? Like I was just like, man, maybe I didn't see the value in it that I see in it now with all the anecdotal stories and the people that have reached out. But my daughter says, I think I suffer from anxiety. So I tell her, I'm like, the organization that Daddy's working with, that Mental Health America? I said, go on their website. And I said, take the screening for anxiety. There's about 12 screenings on there, but one is for anxiety. And I said, just take it privately. And I told her, don't worry about people judging you. It's anonymous. Like whatever you put in there is only going to be for you. So don't lie and let me know how it goes. And I left it at that because I didn't want to push. 2 days later, she comes into my office. She hands me the mail. She went and got the mail. And on her way out, she's like, Dad, I took the thingy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's the anxiety thing. And I was like, oh, the screening. And I remember I was like, how did it go? And she smiled and it was huge. It was a big smile. And she was like, I only have mild anxiety. And I was like, man, I saw the relief on her face and I was just like, that's good, right? You feel better? And she's like, yeah, I feel so much better. And I remember as she was walking out, because she was telling me like all the things that, because it gives you advice on how to manage whatever level you're at, whether it's high, medium, and she's, yeah, I'm going to give it to a couple friends. I think they could use it. I think it'll help them. And that was my light bulb moment. I was like, man, what if we start off and my first thing that I did was I put the screening on, I called Mental Health America. I said, do you mind if I run it through my website? And they were like, please do, get it in the hands of anybody. Because it doesn't ask about guns. It doesn't ask any questions about guns. So I was like, all right, I'm going to put it on bands and I'm going to hand them out at the gun shows that I have to attend for my gun company. And it was crazy because I'm handing out these bands and people are like, what is this? And I'm like, guns and mental health. It's free and anonymous mental health screenings. And people,
good idea.
Yeah, I was not prepared, honestly, because I'm not a mental health professional. Like, I'm a gun guy. And I was not prepared for what people wanted to share with me. You know what I mean?
I'm standing at the doorway, man.
Yeah. And like literally I'm hugging people and like people are crying and telling me all these stories. Yeah. And that's when that was the evolution, right? I was like, what's the next step? I'm like, what if we put it in the boxes of the guns? So it went from wristbands that I was passing out to what if we put it inside the box of the guns, right? Now it's in gun shops, firearms instructors pass it out. It's in over 80 companies. So it's cool that my 11-year-old, I don't even think she appreciates this. I hope one day she does. It was an inspiration, right? And it was something so simple. And this is what I mean when I say we get problem stuck where we don't think we can fix something. It's okay, what can we do? That's a perfect example of the evolution and what you can do.
I love the ownership and the responsibility there of looking at prevention and mitigation of these types of serious events and actually doing something about it, putting something in motion, and then having the guts to do that and to show up and to create all of the products that are needed to make this happen, to get it into the box, to create the tools, to find other tools so that people can evaluate themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and begin to understand who they are, which that's really a huge part of the crisis that I think we're actually facing from a mental health standpoint, is that people don't know or trust themselves. And they find this place now, we're in an era where everything is a diagnosis. We're pathologizing everything. Instead of saying, I have feelings of anxiousness that are temporary, that can go away by using different self-care activities, we say, I have hardline anxiety. May be true, but it can also be the temporary version of you have feelings of anxiousness because life right now is really difficult. You're going through some challenges. There's some things that you're facing right now that maybe you've never faced before, and that can create some uncertainty and discomfort within you. And I look at things more from this anti-fragile perspective, where the things that happen in our life, they shape, they hone, they forge, and they make us better in the long term. You're becoming beyond resilient through that process. And so if we can start to shift the minds of not only the young people, but of people that are like myself, I'm a Gen Xer and pretty stuck in my ways, but there were things that I realized a few years back for myself that by jumping into self-care, looking at breath work as a tool and a modality to help me regulate my nervous system in a place where I was in burnout or I was in crisis, and I didn't want to talk about it because of the stigma that was associated with that.
I think everything is, to me, is like force multipliers, right? The more we can talk about it. And I feel like people don't want to compromise their gun rights. And I think it's been for anybody that uses a firearm for work, or obviously is it part of the 2A culture, right? It's so important. But it's always been this tough discussion to have, because we all think of ourselves as like sheepdogs, right? We're protectors. We know how to handle ourselves. We have firearms. I don't know how many times like people have gotten behind me or said, if something goes down, I'm getting behind you. And I'm like, not even armed, but I'm like, oh, because I'm the gun guy? From the firearms, it's natural. So nobody wants to show weakness. And then the other side of that is when you walk up to a group of people and they just watched a horrible tragedy and you're pro-gun, we know that it's not the time for us to try to be involved. But I feel like Walk the Talk America gives gun people that opportunity to not compromise on their rights, and then also be part of those discussions and show empathy. Say, yeah, we need to work towards a healthier America. And it doesn't seem, okay, what are you doing about it just with your guns? So I feel like a combination of those things will change the culture, and we'll get better at this, and we'll understand that guns and mental health, it's not mutually exclusive. It can go together and the discussions can go together and they can start early. I'm not trying to catch people when they're suicidal or in crisis. I'm trying to keep you so healthy and give you all these tools that you
Right.
stay out of that.
And that is the whole purpose and intent of the content that I create. It's getting people, once again, to know and trust themselves and give themselves the tools, the time, and the opportunity to do the work that they know that they really need to do to propel themselves forward and reorient themselves in the direction they want to go. When you spend more time in that place, moving in the direction and aiming at a target in the future that you want to get to, you're going to spend more time in the present moment trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So are there any questions that I didn't ask you that you wish that I would have?
No, I think you nailed it. Maybe we could talk about, say, my Kids to Kings program. I'm very proud of that. My Kids to Kings program is an inner city youth program in Atlanta. And it's very counterintuitive for many when they just look at it and they see it. But we take kids that are underprivileged, underserved, that historically have never been introduced to firearms in a healthy manner. And we don't just hand them firearms. It's a whole program that they have to earn it. But these kids not only are introduced to responsible gun ownership, but we also tie in mental health. We tie in a financial literacy component. We constantly are bringing in guest speakers. So it's really a mentorship program. But I love it because a lot of these kids, I'm going to give you a quick story. The first time we held a class, we had about 17 kids in the class. And we said, how many of you have access to a firearm, even if you shouldn't? And every kid raised their hand, right? So they have access. Now it's about teaching them what that is and how to do it the right way. And I love it just because they shouldn't have to learn from video games or movies or music. They should really understand it. So I have my kids this year. The NRA show was in Atlanta. So I had the pleasure of bringing my whole group, my whole team to the NRA show and watching my kids go up to each gun manufacturer's booth and watching the presidents of these companies, the engineers of these companies, the marketing directors of these companies, the competition shooters, all talking to the kids, looking them in the eye saying, you could be the next employee at Ruger. You could be the next gun shop owner in your community. You could be the next firearms instructor in your community. You could be a competition shooter. You could be a firearms engineer. That gives these kids hope. And it also, I know my kids will not have a negative experience when it comes to firearms. And they will be, I call them like my little soldiers out there, like that are teaching other kids about responsible gun ownership, because the Second Amendment is for everybody. And so is access to responsible gun ownership, right? Like it's for everybody. I just love that program. It's one of my favorites because, like I said, I'm trying to stop or reduce all negative outcomes of firearms. That's a goal, right? I would love to stop all. It's never going to happen, but you work towards that goal and you just keep getting better. And when someone comes and they say, what do you do for suicide? What do you do for negligence? What do you do for inner city violence? Walk the Talk America has a program. And I want to make it clear, I am the firearms industry. I represent the firearms industry. It's coming from my industry. I am only funded by the firearms industry. That means for the listeners, it's gun companies. The people who historically get accused of not caring and want to arm people that are funding all my programs and making it possible and not even beating their chest, like not going out and running campaigns that say, look what we do, look what we do. They just care. They let me do my thing and they love what I do. So I think it's important to understand that the firearms industry is getting behind these programs and it's coming from us. It's not coming from because the government compelled us. It's a big deal.
No, it is. Taking that intention to develop and create the mentorship opportunity for young people that have access to something that many of them shouldn't have access to. And then the question is always, are they being held safely, or what is the level of access that they actually have? So you're teaching them the responsibility, the accountability, and the safety aspect of all of this. And when people are informed, they tend to do just a little bit better. And so even in that, there's so much prevention and mitigation through that program. I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, just ought to just put a bow on that, right? Like my kids understand one in the chamber, right? They understand muzzle flashing. They understand trigger discipline. Watching them at the NRA show and the way that they handled the guns, watching the presidents of these companies that are like, I remember one of my friends he owns a pretty major gun company, and he goes, and your kids handle guns better than 90% of the people in here. Right. The way that they know where to point it, not to point it at places, hold it, keep their finger off the trigger. Like those are little things that it doesn't matter who you are and where you come from, you should know because, and I'm speaking from experience, my first discharge of a firearm was negligent. I didn't understand one in the chamber when I was like 13 years old and we found a gun. Yeah. And pulled the magazine out and thank God, like, no one died and no one got hurt except for the lawn. But that's Kids to Kings is a program that I could have used. I just think people need to understand that guns are normal. And if we educate people on the proper use of them, even if they don't ever touch a gun their whole life and can say that gun's still loaded, I think that's important.
Always assume that it is loaded, folks. If listeners walk away with just one thing from this conversation, what do you hope it is?
That guns and mental health are not mutually exclusive. They can go together. So if you own a gun or live with somebody who owns a gun, that's a discussion that needs to be had, right? Just like when someone usually buys a gun, they take a safety course and they take a training course, hopefully, right? That doesn't always happen, but we're big on training. We're big on safety. I hope everyone knows the 4 safety rules, right? That is drilled in our head. But I also want people to have a mental health plan. Suicide is the biggest issue when it comes to gun violence, gun death, right? They're all lumped together. Everything's lumped together for one big number. But half to 2/3 of all firearm death is suicide. So you are very likely to never use your firearm in a defensive situation. You're just as likely to maybe use it on yourself in a time of crisis or somebody in your house. So responsible gun ownership, that's what we preach, but also having that plan, having those discussions as a gun owner. I have guns in my house. I do not allow unauthorized access. Everything is locked up. I have children, but I've also have plans. I have a plan with my wife. I tell her if I ever start showing signs of dementia, here's the plan. Okay, we agree on it. Just thinking ahead, if somebody in the house is going through crisis, you need to have a plan to secure your firearm. And that plan, like we talked about earlier, could be temporary, right? Maybe it's 2 weeks. Maybe it's 1 week, but have a plan and think about it. A lot of gun owners, I think, don't think about the threat from within. They're always thinking about the outside threat, right? The biggest threat could be somebody in your house or you. Let's avoid those tragedies by having these discussions and understanding that, once again, guns and mental health are not mutually exclusive. They can go together.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael. Tell everybody how they can reach you and get a hold of some of those resources.
So everything is on our website and everything is free. Walk Talk America does not sell anything. So all of our resources, our mental health plan, our firearms instructor curriculum, our cultural competence course, even if you're not a clinician, you can take that. So go to our website, WTTA.org or walkthetalkamerica.org, or follow us on all social media, and it's at Walk the Talk US.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much. Everybody, be sure to check out the show notes where everything will be linked down below.